The M14 rifle, 7.62 millimeter, is a lightweight shoulder weapon. It is somewhat similar to the M1 rifle in functioning and appearance, but with additional characteristics of other small arms. The M14 rifle is designed for both full automatic and semi-automatic fire. In semi-automatic fire, each squeeze of the trigger fires one round. By turning the selector to full automatic, fire is continuous as long as the trigger is held back and there are rounds in the magazine. One of the objectives in developing the M14 was to provide a weapon which would use the 7.62 millimeter ammunition, standardized for small arms by the NATO nations. The 7.62 millimeter cartridge is 1/2 inch shorter and 12% lighter than the familiar caliber 30 M1 rifle cartridge, but due to an improved propellant powder, it has the same ballistics. The M14 rifle has many of the characteristics of several older weapons. They are the M1 rifle, the previous standard of the United States Army since World War II, the Browning automatic rifle, the carbine, and the submachine gun M3A1. The M14 rifle will, in time, replace these four weapons. The adoption of the M14, one basic weapon, greatly reduces logistical problems. Moreover, it reduces time for training the user and small arms maintenance personnel. The new weapon has a 20-round magazine which is quickly and easily replaced. Before removing an empty magazine, the safety is placed on safe. The empty magazine is removed and a loaded magazine is snapped into place so that it is engaged by the rear of the operating rod spring guide and the magazine latch. Now allow the operating rod spring to force the operating rod forward, carrying the bolt with it, to chamber the first round and lock the bolt. The rifle is now cocked and ready to fire when the safety is off. The magazine also can be replenished from the top with clips of 5 rounds each without removing the magazine from the weapon. To speed up the loading operation for continued firing, the bolt is held to the rear automatically for reloading after the last round in the magazine is fired. This is accomplished by the upward pressure of the magazine follower, forcing the bolt lock into position in front of the bolt. This holds the bolt to the rear while the change of magazine takes place. By pulling slightly to the rear on the operating rod, the rifleman allows the bolt lock spring to expand, pivoting the bolt lock out from in front of the bolt. This also releases the operating rod. As the operating rod is released, it is driven forward by the expanding operating rod spring, taking the bolt with it. The bolt strips the first round from the magazine for chambering. Another feature of the M14 is its flash suppressor. Slots in the suppressor act to break up the escaping gases, thus reducing the flash. The suppressor also acts as a muzzle brake, minimizing recoil and giving maximum stability during firing. This is the way the flash suppressor works. Gas strikes the wide bottom rib of the flash suppressor and exerts downward pressure to keep the rifle stable during firing. Of course, gas escapes in all other directions too. When the propellant gas hits the front of the slots, it tends to pull the weapon forward, reducing recoil. By disassembling or field stripping the weapon, you will become familiar with the parts. To field strip it, first clear the weapon. That is, remove the magazine and check to see there is no round in the chamber. Put the safety in the safe position. Turn the rifle upside down with the muzzle pointing to your left. To remove the firing mechanism, grasp the rear of the trigger guard and pull to your right and pry upward. Then swing up the trigger guard and lift out the firing mechanism. Separate the stock from the receiver by placing your left hand on the gas cylinder and lifting upward on the butt of the stock. The rifle is now field stripped into its 3 basic groups. The firing mechanism assembly, the stock group, and the barrel and receiver group. To further disassemble the weapon into individual parts, turn the barrel and receiver group on its side with the connector assembly up. To release the connector assembly, press forward on it with the right thumb until the forward end can be lifted off the connector lock. Rotate the connector assembly clockwise until the slot at the rear end is aligned with the elongated stud on the sear release. Then slightly lower the front end of the connector and lift it from the sear release. To remove the operating rod spring and spring guide, pull forward on the operating rod spring, relieving pressure on the connector lock. Pull the lock outward. Then remove the operating rod spring and spring guide. Now turn the barrel and the receiver group so the sights are up. Retract the operating rod until the guide lug on its lower surface aligns with the disassembly notch on the receiver. Lift the operating rod out and to the rear, disengaging it from the operating rod guide. Then, to remove the bolt group, grasp it by the roller, and while sliding it forward, lift it upward and outward to the right front with a slight rotating motion. The barrel and receiver group is now field stripped into the connector assembly, the operating rod spring and guide, the operating rod, and the bolt. These basic groups may be further disassembled if required. The rifle is assembled by reversing the procedure. After reassembly, the rifle should be hand-operated without ammunition to check for freedom of action of the components. The M14 is gas-operated. That is, some of the gas formed by the firing of the cartridge is bled to the gas cylinder. In the gas cylinder, the gas inside the piston expands. The piston drives the operating rod to the rear, compressing the operating rod spring. Then the compressed operating rod spring expands, driving the operating rod to its forward position. This combination of backward and forward movements initiated by the firing of each cartridge performs a series of steps known as the cycle of functioning. The cycle of functioning can be broken down into 8 steps. Of course, these are performed as integrated and overlapping actions. The first step is feeding, which is positioning the cartridge ready for chambering. The second step is chambering, seating the round in the chamber. Third step is locking the bolt to the barrel, thus holding the cartridge seated in the chamber so that gas pressure will be maintained in the barrel to propel the bullet. The fourth step is firing, ignition of the primer of the cartridge in the chamber.